Shreemad Bhagavad Geeta, Chapter 3. This is Karma Yoga. Arjuna Vacha Jayasi Chet Karmanaste Mata Buddhir Janardana Tatkim Ghor Karmani Ghore Mam Yojayasi Keshava. Arjuna said, O Janardana, O Kesava, why do you urge me to engage in this ghastly warfare? If you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, has very elaborately described the constitution of the soul in the previous chapter with a view to deliver his intimate friend Arjuna from the ocean of material grief, and the path of realization has been recommended Buddhi Yoga or Krishna consciousness. Sometimes Krishna consciousness is misunderstood to be inertia, and one with such a misunderstanding often withdraws to a secluded place to become fully Krishna conscious by chanting the holy name of Lord Krishna. But without being trained in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, it is not advisable to chant the holy name of Krishna in a secluded place where one may acquire only cheap adoration from the innocent public. Arjuna also thought of Krishna consciousness or Buddhi Yoga or intelligence in spiritual advancement of knowledge as something like retirement from active life and the practice of penance and austerity at a secluded place. In other words, he wanted to skillfully avoid the fighting by using Krishna consciousness as an excuse, but as a sincere student, he placed the matter before his master and questioned Krishna as to his best course of action. In answer, Lord Krishna elaborately explained Karma Yoga or work in Krishna consciousness. Vyami srineva vakyena buddhim mohayasi gumi tadekam vad nischitya yena sreyoham apnupyam. My intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Therefore, please tell me decisively what is most beneficial for me. Sri Bhagavan Vacha Lokesmin Duvidha Nishtha Pura Prokta Mayanadha Jnana Yogena Sanganam Karma Yogena Yoginam. The blessed Lord said, O sinless Arjun, I have already explained that there are two classes of men who realize the self. Some are inclined to understand him by empirical, philosophical speculation, and others are inclined to know him by devotional work. Na karmana manarambha nashkaramam purushoshmite na cha sanyasana deva siddhim samadhigacchati. Not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. The renounced order of life can be accepted upon being purified by the discharge of the prescribed form of duties, which are laid down just to purify the heart of materialistic man. Without purification, one can't attain success by abruptly adopting the fourth order of life. Sannyas. According to the empirical philosophers, simply by adopting sannyas or retiring from fruitive activities, one at once becomes as good as Narayan. But Lord Krishna does not approve this principle. Without purification of heart, sannyas is simply a disturbance to the social order. No hi kaschit क्षणमपि जातु तिष्ठत्य कर्मकृत कार्यते ह्यवशः कर्म सर्व प्रकृति जैर्गुणे. All men are forced to act helplessly according to the impulses born of the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. It is not a question of embodied life, but it is the nature of the soul to be always active. Without the presence of the spirit soul, the material body cannot move. The body is only a dead vehicle to be worked by the spirit soul, which is always active and cannot stop even for a moment. As such, the spirit soul has to be engaged in the good work of Krishna consciousness, otherwise, it will be engaged in occupations dictated by illusory energy. In contact with material energy, the spirit soul acquires material modes, and to purify the soul from such affinities, it is necessary to engage in the prescribed duties enjoined in the Shastras. But if the soul is engaged in his natural function of Krishna consciousness, whatever he is able to do is good for him. कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य या आस्ते मनसा अस्मन् इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा मिथ्याचारः स उच्यते. One who restrains the senses and organs of actions, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. यस्ति इंद्रियाणि मनसा निम्यार्थे भतेर्जुन कर्मेन्द्रिये कर्मयोगं सक्तः स विशिष्यते. On the other hand, he who controls the senses by the mind and engages his active organs in work of devotion without attachment is by far superior. Instead of becoming pseudo-transcendentalists, for the sake of wanton living and sense enjoyment, it is far better to remain in one's own business and exclude the purpose of life, which is to get free from material bondage and enter into the kingdom of God. The prime Swarthagati or goal of self-interest is to reach Vishnu. The whole institution of Varna and Ashram is designed to help us reach this goal of life. A householder can also reach this destination by regulated service in Krishna consciousness. For self-realization, one can live a controlled life as prescribed in the Shastras and continue carrying out his business without attachment, and in that way make progress. Such a sincere person who follows this method is far better situated than the false pretender who adopts show-bottle spiritualism to cheat the innocent public. A sincere sweeper in the street is far better than the charlatan meditator who meditates only for the sake of making a living. नियतं कुरु कर्म त्वं कर्म ज्यायो है कर्मणः शरीर यात्रापि च तेन प्रसिद्धयेद कर्मणः. Perform your prescribed duty, for action is better than inaction. A man cannot even maintain his physical body without work. यज्ञार्थ कर्मणोऽन्यत्र लोकोऽयं कर्म बन्धनः तदर्थं कर्म कौन्तेय मुक्त संगः समाचर. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work binds one to this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in that way you will always remain unattached and free from bondage. Since one has to work even for the simple maintenance of the body, the prescribed duties for a particular social positions and quality are so made that purpose can be fulfilled. Yajna means Lord Vishnu or sacrificial performances. All sacrificial performances also are meant for the satisfaction of Lord Vishnu. The Vedas enjoin Yajno Vai Vishnu. In other words, the same purpose is served whether one performs prescribed yajna or directly serves Lord Vishnu. Krishna consciousness is therefore performance of yajna as it is prescribed in this verse. The Varnashram institution also aims at this for satisfying Lord Vishnu. Therefore, one has to work for the satisfaction of Vishnu. Any other work done in this material world will be a cause of bondage, for both good and evil work have their reactions, and any reaction binds the performer. Therefore, one has to work in Krishna consciousness to satisfy Krishna, and while performing such activities, one is in a liberated stage. This is the great art of doing work, and in the beginning, this process requires very expert guidance. One should therefore act very diligently under the expert guidance of a devotee of Lord Krishna or under the direct instructions of Lord Krishna himself. Nothing should be performed for sense gratification, but everything should be done for the satisfaction of Krishna. This practice will not only save one from the reaction of work, but also will gradually elevate one to transcendental loving service of the Lord, which alone can raise one to the kingdom of God. Sahayagya praja srishtva purovacha prajapati anena prasyadhva mesavostishtu kamadhu. In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods along with sacrifices for Vishnu and blessed them by saying, "Be thou happy by this yajna, because its performance will bestow upon you all desirable things." Devan bhavayatanena te deva bhavayantu parasparam bhavayanta sreya param vapsyatha. The demigods, being pleased by sacrifices, will also please you, thus nourishing one another. They will reign general prosperity for all. Drishtan bhogani vadeva dasyante yagya bhavita tertadana pradayebhyo yo bhukte stena evasa. In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods, being satisfied by the performance of yajna, supply all necessities to man, but he who enjoys these gifts without offering them to the demigods in return is certainly a thief. The demigods are authorized supplying agents on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu. Therefore, they must be satisfied by the performance of prescribed yajna. In the Vedas, there are different kinds of yajna prescribed for different kinds of demigods, but all are ultimately offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For one who cannot understand what the Personality of Godhead is, sacrifice to the demigod is recommended. According to the different material qualities of the persons concerned, different types of yajna are recommended in the Vedas. Worship of different demigods is also on the same basis, namely according to different qualities. For example, the meat eaters are recommended to worship the goddess Kali, the ghastly form of material nature, and before the goddess, the sacrifice of animals is recommended. But for those who are in the mode of godness, the transcendental worship of Vishnu is recommended. But ultimately, all yajnas are meant for gradual promotion to the transcendental position. For ordinary man, at least 5 yajnas known as Panch Mahayajna are necessary. One should know, however, that all the necessities of life that the human society requires are supplied by the demigod agents of the Lord. No one can manufacture anything. Take, for example, all the eatables of human society. These eatables include grains, fruits, vegetables, milk, sugar, etc. for the persons in the mode of goodness, and also eatables for the non-vegetarians like meats, etc., none of which can be manufactured by man. Then again take for example heat, light, water, air, etc., which are also necessities of life. None of them can be manufactured by the human society. Without the Supreme Lord, there can be no profuse sunlight, moonlight, rainfall, breeze, etc., without which no one can live. Obviously, our life is dependent on supplies from the Lord. Even for our manufacturing enterprises, we require so many raw materials like metal, sulfur, mercury, manganese, and so many essentials, all of which are supplied by the agents of the Lord, with the purpose that we should make proper use of them to keep ourselves fit and healthy for the purpose of self-realization, leading to the ultimate goal of life, namely liberation from the material struggle for existence. This aim of life is attained by performance of yajna. If we forget the purpose of human life and simply take supplies from the agents of the Lord for sense gratification and become more and more entangled in material existence, which is not the purpose of creation, certainly we become thieves, and therefore we are punished by the laws of material nature. A society of thieves can never be happy because they have no aim in life. The gross materialist thieves have no ultimate goal of life. They are simply directed to sense gratification, nor do they have knowledge of how to perform yajna. Lord Chaitanya, however, inaugurated the easiest performance of yajna, namely the Sankirtan yajna, which can be performed by anyone in the world who accepts the principles of Krishna consciousness. Further, Lord Krishna says, Yajna sishtasinah santo muchyante sarva kilvishe bhunjate tetodham papa ye panchanthyatma karanat. The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment barely eat only sin. The devotees of the Supreme Lord, or the persons who are in Krishna consciousness, are called santas, and they are always in love with the Lord as it is described in the Brahma Samhita. The sants being always in a compact of love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, the giver of all pleasures, or Mukunda, the giver of liberation, or Krishna, the all-attractive person, cannot accept anything without first offering it to the Supreme Person. Therefore, such devotees always perform yajna in different modes of devotional service such as Sravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Archanam, etc. And these performances of yajna keep them always aloof from all kinds of contamination of sinful association in the material world. Others who prepare food for self or sense gratification are not only thieves but are also the eaters of all kinds of sins. How can a person be happy if he is both a thief and sinful? It is not possible. Therefore, in order for people to become happy in all respects, they must be taught to perform the easy process of Sankirtan Yajna in full Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, there can be no peace or happiness in the world. अन्नाद भवन्ति भूतानि पर्जन्याद संभव यज्ञाद भवति पर्जन्यो यज्ञ कर्म समुद्भव. All living bodies subsist on food grains which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of yajna, and yajna is born of prescribed duties. कर्म ब्रह्मोद्भवं वृद्धिं ब्रह्माक्षर समुद्भवं तस्मात् सर्वगतं ब्रह्म नित्यं यज्ञ प्रतिष्ठितम्. Regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. Yagyartha, or the necessity of work for the satisfaction of Krishna only, is more expressly stated in this verse. If we have to work for the satisfaction of the Yajna Purush Vishnu, then we must find out the direction of work in Brahman or the transcendental Vedas. The Vedas are therefore codes of working directions. Anything performed without the direction of the Vedas is called vikarma, or unauthorized or sinful work. Therefore, one should always take direction from the Vedas to be saved from the reaction of both. As one has to do work in ordinary life by the direction of the state, similarly one has to work under the direction of the supreme state of the Lord. Such directions in the Vedas are directly manifested from the breathing of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is said, Asya Mahato Bhutasya Naswastam Etad Yad Rigvedo Yajurvedo Samvedo Atharvagidasa. The four Vedas, namely the Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samveda, and Atharvaveda, are all emanations from the breathing of the great personality of Godhead. The Lord, being omnipotent, can speak by breathing air, as it is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita. For the Lord has the omnipotence to perform through each of his senses the actions of all other senses. In other words, the Lord can speak through his breathing, and he can impregnate by his eyes. In fact, it is said that he cleansed our material nature and thus fathered all living entities. After creating or impregnating the conditioned souls into the womb of material nature, he gave his directions in the Vedic wisdom as to how such conditioned souls can return home back to Godhead. We should always remember that the conditioned souls in material nature are all eager for material enjoyment, but the Vedic directions are so made that one can satisfy one's perverted desires, then return to Godhead, having finished his so-called enjoyment. It is a chance for the conditioned souls to attain liberation. Therefore, the conditioned souls must try to follow the process of yajna by becoming Krishna conscious. एवं प्रवर्तितं चक्रं नानुवर्तयति धियः अघायुरिन्द्रियारामो मोघं पार्थ स जीवति. My dear Arjuna, a man who does not follow this prescribed Vedic system of sacrifice certainly leads a life of sin. For a person delighting only in the senses, living in vain. Yasma यस्त्वात्मरतिरेव स्यादात्मतृप्तश्च मानव आत्मन्येव च सन्तुष्टस्तस्य कार्यं न विद्यते. One who is however taking pleasure in the self, who is illuminated in the self, who rejoices in and is satisfied with the self only, fully satisfied, for him there is no duty. A person who is fully Krishna conscious and is fully satisfied by his acts in Krishna consciousness no longer has any duty to perform. Due to his being Krishna conscious, all impurity within is instantly cleansed, and an effect of many thousands of yajna performances. By such clearing of consciousness, one becomes fully confident of his eternal position in relationship with the Supreme. His duty thus becomes self-illuminated by the grace of the Lord, and therefore he no longer has any obligations to the Vedic injunctions. Such a Krishna conscious person is no longer interested in material activities and no longer takes pleasure in material arrangements like wine, women, and similar infatuations. नैव तस्य कृतेनार्थो न कृतनेह कश्चन न चास्य सर्वभूतेषु कश्चिदर्थविपाश्रयः. A self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being. तस्माद् सक्तः सततं कार्यं कर्म समाचर असक्तो ह्यचरन् कर्म परमाप्नोति पुरुषः. Therefore, without being attached to the fruits of activities, one should act as a matter of duty. For by working without attachment, one attains the Supreme. The Supreme is the personality of Godhead for the devotees and liberation for the impersonalists. A person, therefore, acting for Krishna or in the Krishna consciousness under proper guidance and without attachment to the result of the work is certainly making progress toward the supreme goal of life. Arjuna is told that he should fight in the battle of Kurukshetra for the interest of Krishna, because Krishna wanted him to fight. To be a good God man or a non-violent man is a personal attachment, but to act on behalf of the Supreme is to act without attachment for the result. That is perfect action of the highest degree, recommended by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Vedic rituals like prescribed sacrifices are performed for purification of impious activities that were performed in the field of sense gratification. But action in Krishna consciousness is transcendental to the reactions of God or heavenly work. A Krishna conscious person has no attachment for the result, but acts on behalf of Krishna alone. He engages in all kinds of activities, but is completely non-attached. कर्मणे संसिद्धि मास्तिका जनतादया लोक संग्रहमेवापि संपश्यन् कर्तुमर्हसि. Even kings like Janak and others attain the perfectional stage by performance of prescribed duties. Therefore, just for the sake of educating the people in general, you should perform your work. यद्ददाचरति श्रेष्ठस्तस्तद्देवेतरो जनः स यत् प्रमाणं कुरुते लोकस्तदनुवर्तते. Whatever action is performed by a great man, common men follow in his footsteps, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. न मे पार्थास्ति कर्तव्यं त्रिषु लोकेषु किंचन न वाप्तं वे वाप्तव्यं वर्त एव च कर्मणि. O son of Parth, there is no work prescribed for me within all the three planetary systems, nor am I in want of anything, nor have I need to obtain anything, and yet I am engaged in work. The Supreme Lord is the controller of all other controllers, and He is the greatest of all the diverse planetary leaders. Everyone is under his control. All entities are delegated with particular power only by the Supreme Lord. They are not supreme themselves. He is also worshipable by all demigods and is the supreme director of all directors. Therefore, he is transcendental to all kinds of material leaders and controllers and is worshipable by all. There is no one greater than him, and he is the supreme cause of all causes. He does not possess bodily form like that of an ordinary living entity. There is no difference between his body and his soul. He is absolute. All his senses are transcendental. Any one of his senses can perform the action of any other sense. Therefore, no one is greater than him or equal to him. His potencies are multifarious, and thus his deeds are automatically performed as a natural sequence. Since everything is in full opulence in the personality of Godhead and is existing in full truth, there is no duty for the Supreme Personality of Godhead to perform. One who must receive the results of work has some designated duty, but one who has nothing to achieve within the three planetary systems certainly has no duty. And yet, Lord Krishna is engaged on the battlefield of Kurukshetra as the leader of the Kshatriyas, because the Kshatriyas are duty bound to give protection to the distressed. Although he is above all the regulations of the revealed scriptures, he does not do anything that violates the revealed scriptures. यदि हयं न वर्तेयं जातु कर्मणि तद्वित मम वर्तमानुवर्तन्ते मनुष्या पार्थ सर्वश. For if I did not engage in work, O Partha, certainly all men would follow my path. In order to keep the balance of social tranquility for progress in spiritual life, there are traditional family usages meant for every civilized man. Although such rules and regulations are for the conditioned souls and not Lord Krishna, because he descended to establish the principles of religion. He followed the prescribed rules. Otherwise, common men would follow in his footsteps because he is the greatest authority. From the Shreemad Bhagavad Gita, it is understood that Lord Krishna was performing all the religious duties at home and out of home as required of a householder. उत्सीदेयुरिके लोका न कुर्याम कर्म चेदहम संकरस्य च कर्ता स्यामुपहन्यामि मा प्रजा. If I should cease to work, then all these worlds would be put to ruination. I would also be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all sentient beings. सक्ता कर्मण विद्वांसो यथा कुर्वन्ति भारत कुर्वाधिद्धंस्तथा शक्तिर्षु लोक संग्रहम. As the ignorant perform their duties with attachment to results, similarly the learned may also act, but without attachment, for the sake of leading people on the right path. न बुद्धि भेदम जन्येद ज्ञानाम कर्म संगिनाम जोशयेत सर्व कर्माणि विद्यायुक्ता समाचरम. Let not the wise disrupt the minds of the ignorant who are attached to fleeting action. They should not be encouraged to refrain from work, but to engage in work in the spirit of devotion. प्रकृते क्रियमाणानि गुणे कर्माणि सर्वश अहंकार विमूढ़ात्मा कर्ताहमिति मन्यते. The bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself to be the doer of activities which are actually carried out by nature. Two persons, one in Krishna consciousness and the other in material consciousness, working on the same level, may appear to be working on the same platform, but there is a wide gulf of difference in their respective positions. The person in material consciousness is convinced by false ego that he is the doer of everything. He does not know that the mechanism of the body is produced by material nature, which works under the supervision of the Supreme Lord. The materialistic person has no knowledge that ultimately he is under the control of Krishna. The person in false ego takes all credit for doing everything independently, and that is the symptom of his nescience. He does not know that this gross and subtle body is the creation of material nature under the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. and as such his bodily and mental activities should be engaged in service of Krishna in Krishna consciousness. The ignorant man forgets that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Rishikesh, or the master of the senses of the material body. For due to his long misuse of the senses in sense gratification, he is factually bewildered by the false ego, which makes him forget his eternal relationship with Krishna. तत्त्ववित्तु महाबाहो गुणकर्मविभागयो गुणागुणेषु वर्तन्त इति मत्वा न सज्जते. One who is in knowledge of the absolute truth, Almighty Arm, does not engage himself in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the differences between work in devotion and work for the fruitive results. The knower of the absolute truth is convinced of his awkward position in material association. He knows that he is part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and that his position should not be in the material creation. He knows his real identity as part and parcel of the Supreme, who is eternal bliss and knowledge. He realizes that somehow or other he is entrapped in the material conception of life. In his pure state of existence, he is meant to dovetail his activities in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. He therefore engages himself in the activities of Krishna consciousness and becomes naturally unattached to the activities of the material senses, which are all circumstantial and temporary. He knows that his material condition of life is under the supreme control of the Lord. Consequently, he is not disturbed by all kinds of material reactions, which he considers to be the mercy of the Lord. According to Shreemad Bhagavatam, one who knows the absolute truth in three different features, namely Brahman, Paramatma, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is called Tattvavid. For him who knows also his own factual position in relationship with the Supreme. Further, Bhagavan says, Prakritir gun sammudha sajjante gun karmasu nan kritsan vido mandan kritsan vinna vichalayet. Bewildered by the modes of material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached, but the wise should not unsettle them, although these duties are inferior due to the performer's lack of knowledge. Mayi sarvani karmani sanyasnyatmuchetasa nirashe nirmamo bhutva yuddhasva vigata jwarah. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me, with mind intent on me, and without desire for gain, and free from egoism and lethargy, fight. Ye me matmidam nityam anutishtanti manava Shraddhavanto na suyanto muchyante tepi karmabhi. One who excuses his duties according to my injunctions and who follows his teaching faithfully without envy becomes free from the bondage of fruitive actions. The injunction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the essence of all Vedic wisdom and therefore is eternally true without exception. As the Vedas are eternal, so this truth of Krishna consciousness is also eternal. One should have firm faith in this injunction without envying the Lord. There are many philosophers who write comments on the Bhagavad Gita but have no faith in Krishna. They will never be liberated from the bondage of fruitive action, but an ordinary man with firm faith in the eternal injunctions of the Lord, even though unable to execute such orders, becomes liberated from the bondage of the law of karma. In the beginning of Krishna consciousness, one may not fully discharge the injunctions of the Lord, but because one is not resentful of this principle and works sincerely without consideration of defeat and hopelessness, he will surely be promoted to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness. Ye tvetabhya suyanto nanu tishtanti me matam sarvajnana vimudhastam vidhi nasthana chetasa. But those who out of envy disregard these teachings and do not practice them regularly are to be considered bereft of all knowledge, befooled and doomed to ignorance and bondage. Sadrisam cheshtate swasya prakritir jnanavanapi Prakritim yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyati. Even a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature, for everyone follows his nature. What can repression accomplish? Unless one is situated on the transcendental platform of Krishna consciousness, he cannot get free from the influence of the modes of material nature, as it is confirmed by the Lord in the seventh chapter. Therefore, even for the most highly educated person on the mundane plane, it is impossible to get out of the entanglement of Maya simply by theoretical knowledge or by separating the soul from the body. There are many so-called spiritualists who outwardly pose to be advanced in the science, but inwardly or privately are completely under the particular modes of nature, which they are unable to surpass. Academically, one may be very learned, but because of his long association with material nature, he is in bondage. Krishna consciousness helps one to get out of the material entanglement, even though one may be engaged in his prescribed duties. Therefore, without being fully in Krishna consciousness, no one should suddenly give up his prescribed duties and become a so called yogi or transcendentalist artificially. It is better to be situated in one's position and to try to attain Krishna consciousness under superior training. Thus, one may be freed from the clutches of Maya. Further, God said, Indriyasyendrasyarthe ragyadveshe vivastito tayornavashamagacheto yasya paripantito. Attraction and repulsion for sense objects are felt by embodied beings, but one should not fall under the control of senses and sense objects because they are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. Sreyan swadharmo viguna paradharmatu sanushchitat swadharme nidhanam sreya paradharmo bhayavaha. It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though they may be faulty, than another's duties. Distraction in the course of performing one's own duties better than engaging in another's duties, for to follow another's path is dangerous. One should therefore discharge his prescribed duties in full Krishna consciousness rather than those prescribed for others. Prescribed duties complement one's psycho-physical condition under the spell of the modes of material nature. Spiritual duties are as ordered by the spiritual master for the transcendental service of Krishna, but both materially or spiritually, one should stick to his prescribed duties even up to death rather than imitate another's prescribed duties. Duties on the spiritual platform and duties on the material platform may be different, but the principle of following the authorized direction is always good for the performer. When one is under the spell of the modes of material nature, one should follow the prescribed rules for particular situations and should not imitate others. Arjuna Vacha Athakena Parayuktoyam Papam Charati Purusha Anichannapi Varsneya Baladiva Niyojita. Arjuna said, O descendant of Vishnu, O descendant of Vishnu, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? Sri Bhagavan Vacha Kam Esha Krodha Esha Rajo Gun Samudbhava Mahashano Mahapapma Vidyayena Mihuvedinam. The blessed Lord said, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material modes of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. When a living entity becomes in contact with the material creation, his eternal love for Krishna is transformed into lust in association with the mode of passion. Or in other words, the sense of love of gods becomes transformed into lust as milk in contact with sour tamarind is transformed into yogurt. Then again, when lust is unsatisfied, it turns into wrath. Wrath is transformed into illusion, and illusion continues the material existence. Therefore, lust is the greatest enemy of the living entity, and it is lust only which induces the pure living entity to remain entangled into the material world. Wrath is the manifestation of the mode of ignorance. These modes exhibit themselves as wrath and other corollaries. The God further says, Dhumena vriyate vahir yatha darso malena cha यथोल्बेनावृतो गर्भस्तथा तेनेदमावृतम्. As fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, similarly the living entity is covered by different degrees of this lust. There are three degrees of covering of the living entity by which his pure consciousness is obscured. This covering is but lust under different manifestations, like smoke in the fire, dust on the mirror, and the womb about the embryo. When lust is compared to smoke, it is understood that the fire of the living spark can be a little perceived. In other words, when the living entity exhibits his Krishna consciousness slightly, he may be likened to the fire covered by smoke. Although fire is necessary where there is smoke, there is no overt manifestation of fire in the early stage. This stage is like the beginning of Krishna consciousness. The dust on the mirror refers to a cleansing process of the mirror of the mind by so many spiritual methods. The best process is to chant the holy names of the Lord. The embryo covered by the womb is an analogy illustrating a helpless position, for the child in the womb is so helpless that he cannot even move. This stage of living condition can be compared to that of the trees. The trees are also living entities, but they have been put in such a condition of life by such a great exhibition of lust that they are almost void of all consciousness. The covered mirror is compared to the birds and beasts, and the smoke-covered fire is compared to the human being. In the form of a human being, the living entity may revive a little Krishna consciousness, and if he makes further development, the fire of his spiritual life can be kindled in the human form of life. By careful handling of the smoke in the fire can be made to blaze. Therefore, the human form of life is a chance for the living entity to escape the entanglement of material existence. In the human form of life, one can conquer the enemy, lust, by cultivation of Krishna consciousness under able guidance. Avrittam jnanametena jnanino vidyavadina kamarupena konteya duspurena nalena cha. Thus, a man's pure consciousness is covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. Indriyani manorbuddhir syadhyadhisthanamuchyate eter vimohayatyesha jnanamavritta dehinam. The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust, which veils the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. तस्मात्त्वमिन्द्रियाण्यादो नियम्य भर्तर्षभ पाप्मानं प्रजयितेनं ज्ञानविज्ञाननाशनम्. Therefore, O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning curb this great symbol of sin by regulating the senses and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Indriyani paranyahur indriyebhya param mana manasastu para buddhir yo buddhe partastu sa. Further Lord says, the working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind. And he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. The Lord advised Arjuna to regulate the senses from the very beginning so that he could curb the greatest sinful enemy, lust, which destroys the urge for self-realization and specifically knowledge of the self. Yagyam refers to knowledge of self as distinguished from non-self, or in other words, knowledge that the spirit soul is not the body. Vijnanam refers to specific knowledge of the spirit soul and knowledge of one's constitutional position and his relationship to the supreme soul. The senses are different outlets for the activities of lust. Lust is reserved within the body, but it is given vent through the senses. Therefore, the senses are superior to the body as a whole. These outlets are not in use when there is superior consciousness or Krishna consciousness. In Krishna consciousness, the soul makes direct connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the bodily functions, as described here, ultimately end in the Supreme Soul. Bodily actions means the functions of the senses, and stopping the senses means stopping all bodily actions. But since the mind is active, then even though the body may be silent and at rest, the mind will act as it does during dreaming. But above the mind there is the determination of the intelligence, and above the intelligence is the soul proper. If therefore the soul is directly engaged with the supreme, naturally all other subordinates, namely the intelligence, mind and the senses, will be automatically engaged in the Katha. There is a passage in which it is said that the objects of sense gratification are superior to the senses and mind is superior to the sense objects. If therefore the mind is directly engaged in the service of the Lord constantly, then there is no chance of the senses becoming engaged in other ways. This mental attitude has already been explained. If the mind is engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is no chance of its being engaged in the lower propensities. In the Katha, the soul has been described as Mahan, the great. Therefore, the soul is above all, namely the sense objects, the senses, the mind and the intelligence. Therefore, directly understanding the constitutional position of the soul is the solution of the whole problem. एवं बुद्धे परां बुद्ध्वा संस्तभ्यात्मनात्मना जहि शत्रुं महाबाहो कामरूपं दुरासदम्. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to material senses, mind and intelligence, one should control the lower self by the higher self, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. This third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is conclusively directive to Krishna consciousness by knowing oneself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, without considering impersonal wideness as the ultimate end. In the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Desire for overloading and sense gratification are the greatest enemies of the conditioned soul. But by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind and the intelligence. One may not give up work and prescribed duties all of a sudden, but by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses, and the mind by steady intelligence directed toward one's pure identity. This is the sum total of this chapter. In the immature stage of material existence, philosophical speculations and artificial attempts to control the senses by the so-called practice of yogic postures can never help a man toward spiritual life. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. Thus ends the Bhakti Vedanta purports in the third chapter of the Shreemad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of Karma Yoga, or the discharge of one's prescribed duty in Krishna consciousness. Thank you.